might know him as DJ. Some people might know him as the man that wrote The White Tiger. Some people might know him as a guy that wears a ghillie suit and will pop a cap in your ass at 300 meters with a 25-06. Everybody give it up for Dr. Joe!
I've never had such a nice introduction. All right. Well, I have the grave misfortune, and I mean the dire misfortune, of possibly getting back into stem cells. So I thought I might talk about stem cells. My other favorite thing is personal arms and preparedness. And a third thing I do is I do a lot of psychology. Actually, I prefer the insane to the ill, but that's a separate subject. So, shall we talk about stem cells or no? Is that a good thing? All right. So now we have perspective. You know, I gave myself my first injection of stem cells on June 8th of 2008, which is a long time ago. How long ago was that? I mean, it'll be 20 years in a few years. It was 15 years. At the time, I was 90-some-odd% permanently disabled. And I went to a disability rating doctor. He said, you're better than 90% disabled. Apply for Social Security disability and put your feet up and watch Leave It to Beaver reruns. And I didn't really want to do that. So I have been studying the molecular structure of the aging process since 1984. And two PhDs from MIT. That has kind of a ring to it, doesn't it? Two PhDs from MIT, Dirk Pearson and Sandy Shaw, wrote a book called Life Extension. And in it, they talked about free radicals and damage to our cells at the molecular level. And they had one message: stay alive. In time, we will discover the science behind aging and disease. Just stay alive. And so I read that book in 1984. It was my Bible. I used to buy cases of the book and give them out to my patients. And 1984 to 94 to 2004, right? So in 2008, we had stem cells. And how many people here remember Dolly the sheep? Remember Dolly the sheep? You heard of Dolly? What happened? What was the deal with Dolly the sheep? Cloning, yeah. So Dolly of the sheep, the way they cloned Dolly was they took a sheep and they took a bunch of fertilized ova from sheep and they put them inside the uterus of the mother sheep. And they did 226 of those, and they finally got one that took, and it implanted properly, and that sheep grew to gestation, and therefore Dolly was born. The way that they did that was they took an older sheep, they removed one cell from its mammary gland, they took out the nucleus, and they put it in another ovum, and then they put that in the mother sheep. Dolly's genetic material came from the first sheep, and that sheep was 6 years old. When Dolly was born, she was 6 years old in her cellular makeup, in her genetics, in her chromosomes, and she died prematurely of diseases of old age. Why? She started out and she was 6 years old. Her chromosomes were 6 years old. The fellow who discovered the aging phenomena was known as Dr. Leonard Hayflick, and he wrote a book which I highly recommend. Leonard Hayflick is off the charts smart. I mean, really. I talked to him a few years ago, and I have a son who's a medical doctor. One is a medical doctor, the other is a chiropractor. And I happened to mention to the medical doctor, I was talking to Leonard Hayflick the other day, and and He said, "You talked to Leonard Hayflick?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You talked to Leonard Hayflick?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Dad, that's like talking to George Washington or Abraham Lincoln." I said, "Yeah, well, he and I got along just fine." So Leonard Hayflick wrote a book called How We Age and Why. And the structure, the molecular structure, the aging phenomena, how many people here have heard of things called telomeres? Ever hear of telomeres? Yeah, okay, so we have telephone, which is speaking at a distance, and we have television, which is seeing at a vision, and we have telomeres, which is at the end of every chromosome, there's approximately 7,500 what they call base pairs. And what happens is, when a cell gets ready to divide, a primer comes in and sits on the end of the telomere. The telomeres open up. The primer comes in, sits on the end of the telomere, and then an enzyme called DNA hydrogenase, DNA polymerase 2 comes in, and it copies everything all the way back. The primer prevents that DNA polymerase enzyme from falling off the end of the chromosome. How many people here have seen the end of a railroad track at a railroad terminal? They got a thing that is like this, and then they got, and so that they don't want the train to fall off the end of the track. Well, the part of the track that is covered up can't be used. And when the primer sits on the end of your chromosome, that part of the chromosome can't be used. And every time that cell replicates, that DNA polymerase enzyme comes in and it copies everything this side of the primer, but it can't copy what's under the primer, which means that every replication, you lose a little segment of the chromosome. It does not get replicated. And the end result of that is the chromosome shortens over time. You have identified by Leonard Hayflick what they call the Hayflick limit.
Is that by design or was that manipulated?
That's by design. That's why the Mother Nature made it. That's a good question now, and I'll address that in a moment. Leonard Hayflick identified that human fibroblasts, most cells, have approximately 52 replications, and then they become senescent, and then they die. Well, when they become senescent and die, guess what happens to you? You become senescent and die. That's what we call the aging phenomena. So there's 7,500 base pairs in a typical telomere, and you lose about 150 base pairs per replication because the primer comes in and sits on that end of the chromosome, and that can't be copied. And so you look at the math is right on the money. 7,500 base pairs, you lose 150, there's 52 replications. What's 52 times 150? 7,500. If you divide 50 into 7,500, you get 150. So the mathematics right on the money. Your base pairs, you lose 150 per replication. You have 7,500 base pairs. You have, that's it. You have 52 replications, then you become senescent and you die. Once you get into the subtelomeric and the peritelomeric areas, then you start seeing people age. But people don't age all at once. It's because slowly, those chromosomes erode at the end. This is called the end replication problem. The end of the telomere does not, the end of the chromosome called the telomere does not replicate. So that's the molecular structure. That's how we age and why, right? So I got involved in the stem cell biology because I thought it was going to be the next big thing in biology, and believe me, it was, and it still is. So I was 90-some-odd% permanently disabled, and on June 8th of 2008, I had made up some stem cells. I made up 2 syringes of them. But I'm not a bench-trained molecular biology scientist. I did the best I could, and I looked at it, and I shot myself in the hip with one, and I could barely walk. I was in horrible pain all the time. And there was another full syringe sitting there, and I said, I must be nuts. I'm not a bench-trained scientist. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just shooting in the dark the best I know how. And I didn't have the courage to take the second syringe. I just left it there and went to bed. Well, I went to bed and I had been in pain all the time for years and years and years. I went to bed and I slept through the night for the first time in maybe 15, 20 years. And I got up the next morning, I stood up, and I was fundamentally without pain. And I said, I must be crazy. Nothing works this well, and nothing works this fast. So I continued to do stem cell shots on myself, and I was getting better. And people would, they'd say to me, what are you doing? And I'd say, I'm doing stem cells. I got my own lab, and I'm doing them, and they're working for me like gangbusters. And so people would say to me, well, I want you to do something for me. I'd say, okay. And I developed a following. I created what I called the Society for the Study of Cellular and Molecular Biology. And I've worked with over 1,000 people since 2008 with human stem cells. And the ones I use are called monocytes. They're very common. I use just off-the-rack molecular biology supplies, and I can't think of anything that they won't fix. And I've dealt, you know what plantar fasciitis is? Really painful feet. I mean, really painful feet. I had a gal who had plantar fasciitis, gave her some stem cells, no apparent improvement. Gave her another shot of stem cells, no apparent improvement. Gave her another shot of stem cells, no apparent improvement. She said, Joe, this is getting expensive. I said, be patient, have faith. Fourth shot, she got up and she had no pain. She went out dancing that night. So from the bottom of your feet, now I have a picture in my pocket of my friend Ricardo. Ricardo is Brazilian. He and I became friends. He was my mechanic. He took care of my cars. And he had problems with his health. He had kidney failure so bad and congestive heart that each of his legs was as big around as my waist. And he went through a crisis. I took him to the hospital to get some Lasix in him to get the water off of him so that he wouldn't die. I made up his stem cells, and I gave him a series of stem cell shots. I don't want to mislead you to think that one shot is going to do everything. It usually does a lot. But anyways, he later on, he went and he had a sonogram of his kidneys. Now, Ricardo was as close to dead as you're going to get. And the technician said, well, according to the sonogram, you show no evidence of ever having had kidney problems. That's a big deal. And I'll show you a picture of Ricardo that I have on my telephone. They unzipped him and they did open heart surgery on him. And there's a photograph showing a big scar. And then there's another photograph where the scar is almost gone. You can barely see it. That's because he was having stem cells. If you look at him, there's a photo with him. He's almost bald. And there's another photo with a full head of hair, which is, he was 60 some odd years old. So the point is, from heart disease to kidney failure to, I had a guy who had he had hepatitis or cirrhosis of the liver. He looked like a lemon. He was so yellow. I gave him a shot of stem cells. He lived in like a 5-6 story residential place. And the next day, he was running up and down the stairs, taking his laundry to the basement. I have seen literally about 1,000 cases. I have never, ever, 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 ever seen the stem cells hurt anybody. The biggest downside of the stem cell biology as I was practicing it was people were terrified of their own cells. I mean, there was like, oh dear, oh, I don't know, oh dear, oh, do I have to do more than one? Oh dear, I don't know. And I got so sick and tired of listening to people. You got a miracle sitting right in front of you and people are going, oh, I don't know, I'm afraid. So now that we have lost approximately 25 million people worldwide to the loving care of our medical doctors and our medical system, and there's more people dying every day, I hope that people won't be terrified of their own cells. right? It was just completely crazy. So, the stem cell biology reigns supreme. To me, I used to send people to a company called SpectraCell down in Houston, and we would draw their blood and send it to SpectraCell, and SpectraCell would measure the telomeres, would measure the length of the telomeres. Well, I had a friend and colleague and student, Dr. Jerry Vind, and as we age, the chondrocytes in our elastic tissue, especially the discs of the spine, they go through the Hayflick limit, 52 replication. And then they die, and then the discs begin to come together, and they pinch the nerves in the neck, and people get numbness and tingling in their arms. That's known as paresthesia dysesthesia. And he was losing his arms. He couldn't feel his hands. So he came to me and said, "What can you do?" I said, "Well, let's try some stem cells. But first, let's get you a telomere test, telomere repeat amplification protocol, TRAP, and it measures the length of the telomeres." So he was like 80 years old. We had those measured. They came back, set those aside, made up some cells, and every Monday morning I would give him a shot of stem cells in the neck area. Those cells migrate, and they migrate significantly. I had loose teeth. My teeth were loose in my gums. I gave myself a series of shots in my hip. My hip got better, and my teeth tightened up in the socket. My teeth were no longer. So then I said, man, these things really do migrate. So I gave Jerry Vinda, Dr. Vinda, a series of shots, and he regained complete function of his hands, no longer had tingling, dysesthesia. I said, let's take your blood, send it back to SpectraCell and compare it. Well, we did, and his telomere was 8% longer, and he looked significantly younger. So if I could get an 8% improvement in a series of 12 injections, one every Monday morning, what would happen if we did that 3 different times? You would get a reversal of the aging phenomena. Those cells secrete an enzyme known as telomerase, or telomere, acetyl N-terminal transferase, and it contains like a template of the end of the telomere. And every time you put it in, the thing just flips and it re-extends the telomere. If you can think of a medical miracle greater than that, I'd like to know. So he literally looked very significantly younger, and his arms came back, and he was really pleased. I was astonished, because to me that was the first true evidence, laboratory evidence, that his telomeres were this long, and we did a bunch of shots, and then his telomeres were that long. And it was significant, and it was obvious clinically. It was very, very significant. So, and you can do that with anything. Randy Kelton, our friend, he came to me and he had macular degeneration. He couldn't see well.
Wait, Randy, the last time he was here, he looked younger
Yeah.
than he has in the past.
Yeah. I mean, there's an overall youthifying effect. So,
Is he still taking the shot?
I think he lost.
no, I haven't, yeah, he's lost some weight. I haven't done shots, I haven't done stem cells in quite a while. I was having all kinds of problems. Well, I'll tell you about that, but please ask me questions and I'll fill you in as best I can. So anyways, he had macular degeneration. And he told me, I have macular degeneration. I said, what? He said, I have macular degeneration. I said, what? He said, I have macular degeneration. I said, I can't hear very well. And then he got mad at me. Anyways, he had macular degeneration. He came over, I made up his cells, and I gave him a shot at 6 o'clock on Saturday night, and then we went and had dinner, and then he drove home, and on his way home, he called me and he said, I can read all of the street signs. I haven't been able to read them for years. It fixed his macular degeneration. Well, I fly little airplanes when I'm not sitting in prison unjustly, and I have to go in and get an eye exam every once in a while. So I went in and I got an eye exam from my eye doctor, and he said, "What are you doing for your eyes?" And I said, "Nothing in particular." He said, "No, don't tell me that. What are you doing for your eyes?" I said, "Nothing. Why? What's up?" He said, "Your eyes are better now than they were 4 years ago when I examined you the last time." So what happens is, as we age, the cells have to divide. A primer comes in, sits on the end of the chromosome. It covers up the end segment. This is the end replication problem. Then a primer comes in, or then an enzyme known as DNA polymerase II comes in, and it copies everything all the way down, but it can't copy what? The part that's sitting under the primer. Therefore, you have a limited number of replications. So in comes a shot of cells, stem cells, that secrete telomerase, and they go and they re-extend the telomere. And that causes gene expression to be different, protein synthesis to be that of a younger person, and they look younger and they can see better and they stand up straight and their skin is better. And if they have degenerative discs in their back, I had one guy came in and he could barely breathe. He had chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD. And he had a bottle of oxygen. He'd walk a few feet and then he'd pant and then he'd walk a few more feet. Well, I gave him a few stem cell shots right above the lung fields. They permeated in and they fixed his lungs. And he ended up being the one who put the boat in the water on Sunday morning when they went bass fishing. But his wife came to me and she said, "I've been diagnosed by x-rays. I have degenerative discs in the middle of my back and it hurts. Can you fix me?" I said, I don't know. Because all of this stuff at the time was really very experimental. But I drew some blood, made it up, she gave her a shot. 8 weeks later, she came back to me and said, "They took some more x-rays and the disc in my back, which was deteriorated, has regrown completely. They want to know what I'm doing." And I told them, "Well, whatever you do, don't tell them you're coming to me for stem cells." The stem cell biology is the most staggering advancement in medicine imaginable. How many people here have heard of Randy White? Right? The football guy? Well, he got tired of it. He came to me because he's been smacked so many times. It destroyed his neck. Gave him a series of stem cells, he got better. But in that period of time, he was out he became a celebrity rodeo guy. And he was riding some bucking bronco, and it ripped the end of his thumb off. Well, he came to me and he said, "Dr. Joe, your stem cells regrew my thumb. It was torn off, and I now have a normal thumb." I was stunned. Every time I've dealt with stem cells, the results have been next to miraculous. Just absolutely. And, you know, when people would come to me, they'd be terrified of their own cells. I really got tired of that. We have truly a medical miracle. Unfortunately, the MDs got a hold of it, and what they do is they'll draw some blood, or they'll use umbilical cord pellet, and they'll parcel it out a little bit, right? Like if you got a bad elbow, they'll give you, "Okay, oh, this is a big deal. We'll give you a shot in your elbow." They get better almost immediately, right? But what I was doing was I was creating an enormous flood of stem cells. I would draw the blood, put it in the incubator, and leave it for 3, 4, 5 days, and those cells would multiply and multiply and multiply until there was gazillions of them. Then I would put them in people, and they would be euthified to the point where I had people crossing the Mexican border, and then when they came back, the Americans said, "Well, how come you look different? You look younger now than you look in a picture that was taken 5 years ago." Well, I had some problems with the driver's license people. I went in to get my driver's license renewed, and they looked at me and said, "This looks like you, but you look younger in person than you did 5 years, 10 years ago. What's going on here?" I said, "Well, I get a lot of extra rest and I'm taking extra vitamins." I talked my way out of it. But the real truth of the matter is, it is the molecular structure of the aging process itself that we understand, and we have a means to intervene beneficially and literally reverse the aging process. I had an assistant, her name was Susan. She was in her 70s, and she didn't like getting older. So she got a couple of her friends, and they came to me and they said, we want stem cell facelifts. I said, really? They said, yeah. I said, okay, well, what do you want me to do? They said, we want you to give us stem cell shots every Monday morning. We will bring in professional grade photography, right? And I was interested in disease. I was not interested in vanity. But I said, okay, I don't care, I'll do it. Sure, why not? So I made up a bunch of stem cells for those 3 women. At the end of 12 weeks, they looked dramatically better. I mean, dramatically better. I gave them shots in the face, just what they wanted. Used a little diabetes insulin needle, tiny needle. And they looked great, they were happy. I saw them 6 months later. And here these women in their 70s looked like they had just stepped off of Cosmo magazine's front. They were beautiful and young, and of course they're women, so they couldn't shut up about it. But it was, you know, it was really amazing. The improvement, I mean, it was just astonishing. So we understand the molecular structure of the aging process. I don't talk about it too much because nobody can understand what I'm jabbering about. But the real truth of the matter is, like Tony Soprano said, Odette, where's the sting? Where's your sting, right? My observation is that your telomeres control the aging phenomena completely. And if you extend the telomeres, you just get young again. When I gave myself my first shot, I was on a road trip with my girlfriend Esther. And I gave myself my first shot, and I would look in the mirror, and I was getting younger. And I kind of panicked because I said, what's this going to do? Am I going to look like I'm 12? But it was so noticeable, you know. And we had no experience. Back when I was doing this, we had no experience. But universally, without exception, every time, there's only one time, I had one guy who was like 600 pounds, and he had back pain. Well, guess what? You got back pain because you weigh 6. I gave him a shot, it didn't make too much difference. But I cannot think of anything else. There is a form of rheumatoid arthritis where the bones poke through the skin and people ooze blood and tissue fluid. I had a woman come to me with that form of rheumatoid arthritis. I made up the cells and shot her, and she got better in front of my eyes. In stem cell biology, in practice, there is a sweet spot. I used to love to get people about 75 years of age, and they're starting to lose range of motion in their neck, and they want to keep driving. Hello? Yeah, there it is. So they come in to me and they say, Dr. Joe, I can't move my neck. I can't turn my head. I want to drive, but I can't turn my head. And I'd make up the cells, and I'd give them an injection right here and right here, and I'd say, move your neck. And they'd go, so soon? You just gave me the shot. I said, move your neck. Well, I would do an analysis, a range of motion. They'd be locked up. Must be out of batteries. Really good.
See if there's another microphone. Is there 2?
No.
Just 1?
Well, I'm almost done talking, so that's good. So they couldn't move their neck. I'd do a range of motion. They'd show that they, had very limited range of motion. I give them a shot, and they'd go, why, I can move my neck. They always have their wife with them. Matilda, I can move my neck. Look, I can move my neck. So that's the sweet spot. It's easy to understand. People don't ask me a lot of stupid questions, and they accept that they're better. But it will fix. I mean, I have never seen anything that it wouldn't fix. I had a bad elbow that I could barely move. I gave myself a shot maybe 10 years ago. I can move that thing all day long. I can't feel anything. Knees, elbows, wrists, migraine headaches, depression for women. Oddly enough, it makes people stand up straight and they get more cheerful because they're younger.
Can I ask you something? I think one of your patients possible one of your patients had a condition called fibromyalgia.
I doubt it. What was her name?
Didn't Lacey? Was her name?
Macy?
Macy, yeah. Did she have a form of fibromyalgia?
She had fibromyalgia and a whole bunch of other stuff.
Yeah, did you do any, I know it's none of my business, but I have a friend that suffers with this. It's disability.
Oh, Macy.
She can't work.
Macy did so much better. She worked for me in the lab for a long time.
Yeah.
And she's always after me, you're going to do stem cells, you're going to do stem cells. Well, I'm kind of softening up. Now that the world is not as insane as it was 6 weeks ago, you know, you can go, I mean, I went to jail. I was adjudicated as completely innocent. The trial court never had me heard my spiel. I'm still in shock over that. The degree to which they can just grab you, phone up some charges, and throw you in jail for years.
Right.
For years. What they really did was they tried to kill me. But
Yeah.
anyways,
Because
you know.
you had an alternative healing.
Yeah, and it's real healing. But you know, I mean, name something, knees, elbows. I had 1,000 patients, and they all got well, except for one that I can think of. Right? And you know, I always used to say, I'd like to find a place where it doesn't work. Well, I never found it. It always worked.
Well, in their condition, like, myself an example, when you first tested me, the blood was not up to par.
Right.
And so since then, I've done a lot of work. And so it should be up to par now, but that is one of the conditions.
Well, it's not that the stem cells wouldn't work. Every once in a while, I'll find, you know, this G5 thing. I had 2 women who were coming to me for stem cells, and I was making huge amounts of beautiful stem cells. And they were doing the scalar thing. You know what that is?
Yes, I don't like that. Yeah.
Well, they were doing it, and they had great stem cells. They stopped doing it, and 60 days later, I would take the blood culture, and I could not find a single stem cell. So I'm probably going to try it again.
Testing. Okay. I'm cautiously going to try it again, but I don't know. We've now got G5 up in the air, and we've got, you know, barium salts coming down on us from chemtrails. I mean, I don't know what's going on. So I'm going to have to make up some stem cells and see what we get out of it. But the final word on the stem cells is we have no idea what they'll do. And it's all good all the time. Any more questions? You have a question? Your hair would probably turn dark again. And the reason I don't bother with stem cells is I've got other things I'm interested in, and I'm inherently kind of lazy. I like to sit and think or lay down and think about stuff. But you know, people say, you know, why don't you do stem cells for yourself? Well, I can't tell you how many stem cells the guys, their hair came in black and they got a whole lot more hair. I gave myself a shot of stem cells in the neck just to see what they would do to my cognitive ability. And within 3 minutes, I was at a friend's house, I remember precisely the day. I was looking out the window, there was a road out there, and I said, my goodness, I can memorize the position of each of the leaves on each of these trees, and I could easily memorize the numbers of all of the license plates on the cars that drive by. It was a stunning, amazing improvement in my cognitive ability.
I think that's great. With the knowledge and the study on this over the years with you,
Right.
could any of this be applied to any of the junk DNA that they call junk that is not junk?
Well, you know, I had a, you know, the whole thing with genetic diseases and autoimmune disease, they brought me a princess from, she lived in London, but she was you know, like from India, right? And she was as big around as this, and she, you know, she said, I think I'm gonna die. That's what they say. I said, well, what do you want from me? And she said, well, I want to marry my childhood sweetheart and before I die. I said, all right, well, I made up the cells, and I'll be darned, she got better, and I mean really better. And I was the guest of honor at her wedding down the street from Buckingham Palace in London, England. They flew me over there. So, I mean, it's just on and on and on and on and on and on and on. They all got better. And then I went to jail. And I sat there looking at the floor saying, I didn't do anything. I didn't hurt anybody. Nobody complained. I shouldn't be here, right? It was crazy.
Two things. One, many are the afflictions of the righteous.
Well, I must be pretty righteous because I've been afflicted.
Are you thinking about starting up again?
I am.
All right, well, just put me on your list because I think my blood is a lot better.
All right, will you? Okay. All right, I'll do that. If I do it, I'll let you know.
Out of courtesy, I didn't interrupt you numerous times when most of us would probably want to applaud.
Well, in life, my saying in life is everyone gets basically what they deserve. So if you want to apply, you know, I used to run. It's such a shameful thing to see healthcare turn into the distribution of drugs and little else. Right? I used to practice in upstate New York, and it's always cloudy there and cold and damp, and all the kids have earaches and they have ear infections. Why? It's because there's not enough sunlight to irradiate their skin and give them enough vitamin D. So I would give the kids vitamin D and a calcium tablet, and the mothers, I mean, I don't know if you've ever had a sick child, but these mothers had kids who were sick for years. I would fix the kid, I'd give them what they needed, and they would fall asleep in their mother's arms while she was talking to me. Those women just adored me. When I was in Utica, New York, well, if I walked into a restaurant, everybody knew me. People would stand up out of respect. And it's not that hard. It's not that hard. All of this stuff about disease and, you know, you have to be a brilliant doctor, it's fundamentally not that difficult. If your guiding light is Mother Nature, and if you understand the molecular biology of the chromosomes, it's not that hard to heal impossible diseases. And of course, you know, you're not going to save them all. But boy, I always took it personally when I lost a patient. So we have a whole new molecular biology of medicine. My hope is that JFK or RFK can put the medical people back in a cage where they belong, and we can get to work doing something positive for health. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, really, how crazy am I? You know?
You're not crazy. You were ahead of your time, and they didn't like it.
Boy, did that really cost me.
Wasn't stem cells like the big new thing? It was on ABC.
Oh yeah, but only if you have a medical degree and you're doing it under supervision of the pharmaceutical companies. What the pharmaceutical companies did was they bought the legislature, and then the legislature made anything but our pharmaceuticals, in essence, illegal. And the only way that they could do that was we've been stripped of our rights as people, as we the people, and we've been stripped of the common law. I never heard anybody under the common law, nothing would have happened. There was no cause of action. It was total nonsense. And that's what this is what Jefferson and the boys cautioned us against. They didn't know how, but they knew sooner or later a new tyranny would emerge, right? And then we live under it. And it costs us money and it costs us our lives quite often. Yes, Francine? Do you date older guys? I want to know. Go ahead, give me a smile.
Beyond that. Beyond that. Okay. I want to, before you end your presentation, promise me you're going to give us all an update on white tiger.
Oh, on the white tigers. The gift of the white tigers. Well, I was approached by, Mint Dentistry? You see the dentistry?
Yes.
All right, so the president of Mint Dentistry was a client of mine some time ago, and he was in love with the white tigers. So they said, we want to arrange for you to build a management tool so that we can get the white tigers into the general speaking of our company, and we want to sponsor you to do a film on the white tigers. Well, there has been a number of changes in their upper management, so that's still in the works, but it's been delayed. In the meantime, I wanted to bring the white tigers to Japan. There's a movie called The Last Samurai, Tom Cruise. And then the first scene, all the samurai charge out of the forest on horseback, and they have a banner. What's on the banner? A white tiger. So the white tigers is legend in Japan, China, Malaysia, all the Asian countries. And I had a lot of contacts inside of the Japanese community, so I said, all right, let's do this. Got it translated into Japanese, and we're about to start marketing it in Japan. Now, I have a friend who was at a parade this last summer, and he saw a balloon above the parade, and it was a white tiger about 30 feet long and 20 feet tall. I'm thinking about going to Tokyo and opening a daycare center using the gift of the white tigers as the motif, and if I put a balloon up with a white tiger on it, in 24 hours, everybody in Tokyo will know that the gift of the white tigers is here. And the Japanese, they will do anything to help their children succeed in life. Consequently, at the same time all this is coming out, how many people here have heard of emotional IQ? Emotional IQ is the big thing. I had a friend of mine, Paul, who's working with me in marketing, take the emotional IQ, take a chat GPT and say, how does the gift of the white tigers install emotional IQ in children? He came back with a beautiful white paper, which if any parent reads, they'll say, I have to get a copy of this book for my child. So emotional IQ, the gift of the white tigers, it's all coming together. And we'll have it here in the States, but I'm really looking forward to doing it in Japan.
I think it's great. I really do. And I get weird feelings every now and then. From when you told me that several months ago or a year ago, you're going to do well with that.
Oh, my hope is that the gift of the white tigers. I also have a project called, that I call the Universal Human Rapport Project. And I'll give you a few seconds worth of that. Many years ago, I was cracking backs and putting needles in people. I was doing acupuncture. And in Oriental medical theory, traditional Chinese medicine, there are colors that people have. If they have a problem with their heart, usually their face will be red. Well, they have got high blood pressure, makes sense. If they have problems with their kidneys, usually they'll have deep circles under their eyes that'll be dark. If they have problems with their liver and gallbladder, they'll have a characteristic kind of gray-green look. And it's often associated with migraine headaches. Anyways, this gal comes in and she's green as a Christmas tree. And I say, what's wrong? And she says, I have migraine headaches. Okay. There are some acupuncture, Chinese herbs. I say, come back and see me in a week. She came back in a week. She felt immediately better with the acupuncture, and she looked, she turned pink and healthy looking. And she came back in a week, she was green again. So I gave her my acupuncture and whatever. I said, see me in a week. She came back in a week. She was green again. I said, do you have anything in your life that's making you angry or frustrated? She said, no, not that I can think of. I said, really? She said, well, I'm going through a divorce, but other than that, everything is fine. I said, oh, okay. So I began to see how emotional upset can upset the internal physiology, specifically the lungs, large intestine, stomach, spleen, heart, small intestine, bladder, kidney, gallbladder, liver, thyroid, adrenals, all of the systems. And I began watching people for emotional upset and its concomitant physiologic disease promotion. And the end result was I developed a new tool that I call physiologic healthcare, the study of the structure of healing. And I noticed how many people are horribly out of rapport, and they're fighting all the time, or getting divorces, or this, that, or the other thing. And I created what I call the Universal Human Rapport Project. The project is basically just simple. It's designed to get people in rapport. You know, in 1955 in America, when you had Sunday dinner, everybody sat down and had Sunday dinner. And they were all doing the same thing and talking, and they were in rapport. We all agreed that Joe DiMaggio was a great baseball player. That agreement was a form of rapport. We had rapport. We saluted the flag. We had rapport, sameness. As we've lost that, the stress of not being in rapport has caused an increase in what is known as free radicals. It's a stress, singlet oxygen, sulfoxide, all kinds of damaging molecular engines are running around inside of your systems, and they are increased under conditions of rapport deprivation. So I identified what did people suffer from on the oceans in the 1700s in the British Navy? They got scurvy. They got scurvy, which is what? A lack of vitamin C. It's a deficiency disease. Well, I watched people get nuttier and nuttier over the years, and I came to realize being deficient in rapport causes disease. And I call it the rapport deprivation syndrome. And I'm about to make a couple of videos on it. I'm going to give them away for free. And every time I tell people about the Universal Human Rapport Project, people go, oh, that makes sense. And they get on board with the concept. The concept is easy to understand. But I'm lucky in the sense that nobody else has really noticed it. I mean, you look on, you look through the literature of psychology, and they will not say there is a syndrome of rapport deprivation that leads to long-term degenerative disease. And that's my message. In the early 70s, mid-70s, two men called Dr. John Grinder and Dr. Richard Bandler developed what is known now as neuro-linguistic programming, and they did an analysis of the external behavioral patterns of people who were good at rapport. Because they did that research, we now have access to that information, and we can synthesize rapport. Where people are out of rapport, if they know what they're doing, they can synthesize rapport. And you can create rapport between people immediately, where that was, up until this breakthrough, simply not possible. I started studying neurolinguistic programming in 1978. And so that's what, 40 some odd years? So I have I'm reasonably familiar with the material. But the Universal Human Rapport Project, rapport deprivation sickness, in about 2005, I had two doctors, Dr. Araceli Cruz and another doc, I can't remember her name, Mercedes. They were two Hispanic gals from the Dominican Republic. And they said, we know you do psychology. We have a friend who is suicidal. Will you see her? I said, well, what do you want me to do? And they said, well, we just want you to see her. And we don't know what to do. We're only MDs. I said, all right. So they brought her over, and this girl, she was 40 years old, and on her 40th birthday, her boyfriend told her, you're too old, hit the bricks, I'm breaking up with you. At that point, she went into a suicidal depression, didn't eat, didn't wash, and she looked like hell. So anyways, I've been working in the field of prenatal psychology with the idea that before we're born, the influences around us influence and have something to do with our personality. So just for the heck of it, I had her put her head down, and I said, she only spoke Spanish. I said, what's going on with your family? And then she started to cry. She said, my mother and father are poor people in Colombia. They can't afford another child. It's better that I should die. And that stuck as a complex generalization at the deepest levels of her central neuraxis. And I changed the structure of the representation using neuro-linguistic programming, and she came out of suicidal depression, and she wasn't suicidal anymore. And I was just stunned at that. And every time I worked with people who were suicidal, I have found fundamentally the same problem. It was a very strongly unwanted pregnancy, and the person got a complex generalization, I shouldn't be here. And so I've worked with a number of suicidal people, and that's another project. I mean, that's just another project. And you know, I have the Wonder Baby program. Based on the prenatal psychology, I developed a program of prenatal stimulation where the parents could stimulate the baby. I call it the Wonder Baby program, and I have about 5 Wonder Babies that I coached through the prenatal period, and they are superior human beings. They have accelerated language acquisition, vocabulary acquisition, hand-eye coordination. They look like miniature Olympic athletes, and their degree of alertness is astonishing. I had a student named Rick, and he had a daughter or a granddaughter, and she got pregnant, and Rick was very much a student of my material. And he went and he applied the Wonder Baby technique, and that child who was born, they had videotapes of the child in class with other children. And the other children were kind of like, right? And this kid was smart as a whip. When I saw the video, I said, my God, this is key. Personality structure is established as a series of simple Pavlovian stimulus response reflex arcs in the prenatal period. And all of the problems that people have in life, without exception, are the end result of maladaptive reflexes established during that period under conditions of maternal or fetal distress. And I've never found an exception to that general rule. So, aren't you bored with me yet?
No. And so I want to segue that topic into, well, obviously, with us using science says we use 3% primarily of our brain. A few rare people may go up to 10%. So why do we have a brain if we can't fully use it?
Well, you can fully use it.
Okay, science says we haven't, though. So
Well, most people don't, but it doesn't mean they can't.
okay, so how? Just like we've got junk DNA, how can we?
We got junk in our heads, that's for sure.
Yeah. So how can we?
All right, well, I'm kind of glad you asked that, but not really. Because it leads to, more discussion. Here's the deal. Are you sitting down? In the 80s, a fellow named Robert Dilts, he was one of the developers of neuro-linguistic programming. They had a bunch of people that were really spectacularly bright people. And what Robert Dilts did was he analyzed the writings of Jesus of Nazareth, Albert Einstein, and Michelangelo. And he identified the neurological activity in the brain of those, and he wrote a book called Tools for Dreamers, How to Become More Creative. And I read Robert Dilts' material. I know the man. I've been in seminars with him. And I looked at it and I said, well, I can do better than this. I did a postdoc in neurology. I did another postdoc in diagnosis and internal diseases. I did another postdoc in orthopedics, and I did all that Chinese medicine for so long. I know a lot of stuff, and it comes in handy. Anyways, I took Robert Dilts' material and I put it on steroids times 10, and I created what I call the whole brain creativity technology. So most people don't use much of their brain. It's quite obvious if you talk to them.
Well, I'm thinking the stem cells might help.
The stem cells will do the absolute anatomical, physiological stuff, but at the same time, I had an instructor in NLP, and in NLP, you watch people's eyes and see what part of their brain they don't use. Well, he would say, he'd have people come in, and they would be going, this is how I'm stuck. This is how I'm stuck. This is how I'm stuck. And the therapist would be going, well, this is how I'm stuck. This is how I'm stuck. This is how I'm stuck, right? So hola.
Sorry, welcome Barbara, I was working.
Good, at least somebody's doing something. So anyways, the end result of that was I spent a number of days studying brain activity and applying a technique that I developed. I'll give it to you if you want one of these days. But it's the whole brain creativity technique. And after that, I would like go up to people and say, do you have any problems that you can't solve? Please share them with me. I'm looking for problems. I couldn't find anything I couldn't solve. The only thing I really couldn't solve was a corrupt government. That I couldn't solve. But it looks like that it's being taken care of for us.
And I think you'll be able to, you're going to be able, if you desire to bring back to life your stem cell treatments, I believe you can.
Well, now that aging is really a decision variable, there's a lot of things that open up. I mean, really open up, But I mean, it's all fun and interesting too. I don't do anything unless it's fun and interesting.
Well,
You know?
it is interesting.
Yeah.
The potential for your stem cells is just, you're at the tip, you're just at the tip.
Well, the potential, I want to do a bunch more wonder babies. I want to open some daycare centers where we can work with kids who are born, but we can work with pregnant gals who are about to give birth, and the difference is so far off the chart. I've created about 5 wonder babies, and boy, they're exceptional kids. So we covered. Sure.
Now, what's the correlation between the emotional, what was the emotional quotient?
EQ, emotional IQ.
Emotional IQ.
And
what is the attack that the corrupt court system is using and the corrupt education system? How are they attacking our emotional IQ? And what could be done to reverse it when I go and speak to city councils and school boards? What fun could I have to put a mirror up and make it beam back against them? Would there be a way to do that?
when I was young, the people across the street had some cats, and one of the cats had kittens, plural, a bunch of them. And the little girls, they liked to play house and they wanted to pretend to be moms. So they made little clothes for the kittens, and they put the clothes on the kittens, and they moved the kittens' hands, and they went, see the kittens saying hi, and they moved the kittens here, and they moved the kittens there, and they moved the kittens here, and they moved the kittens here, there. Guess what happened to the kittens? They all died. And you cannot take free will and choice away from an organism and expect it to prosper. So you drive by and you see the kids, and they are bitter, sullen, insolent, resentful, where they should be curious and chipper and upbeat and welcoming. So the corporate state demands you stand here or you won't get a job. You do as you're told, or you won't get a job and you can't have anything. So most people just, we're a regimented society, and we try to, some people try to break out of that by dyeing their hair green and putting a bone through their nose. But that is a poor excuse for real individuality. The only solution to me is get rid of as much of the corporate state and its demand for instant, unquestioning obedience. And that takes us back to the common law, right? So we got a lot of work to do, but we got a lot of good tools to work with. And if I can get the Universal Human Rapport Project off the ground, you'll have people to be in rapport with. And if I can get the whole brain creativity technology in common use, you'll have whole brain people, smart, creative people in rapport. And believe me, there's very little, if anything, that we can't do. Does that make sense? So, I'm looking forward to a new renaissance.
So what would, cause you to decide to go ahead and start up your skeleton treatments again?
What's the holdup?
Well, I'm thinking about a bunch of things. I'm involved in a bunch of projects. I've had a bunch of people come up and say, we want to do stem cells. You know, like I said, I wanted to move to Mexico and, you know, go to the beach. I probably will start doing stem cells within the next 30 days, 30 to 60 days. And you're second in line for Macy. Macy just, every time I talk to her, did you do some stem cells? Have you done? No. I mean, she's really, you know, she's really ill. I mean, she goes to all these various docs. She's been told she has parasites. She's got 16 different kinds of parasites, and so on and so forth. And, you know, I had a dark field microscope. Do you know what that is? You take a drop of somebody's blood, you put it on the microscope, you put a cover slide, and you bring the microscope down, and you shine a light from the side so that you get a contrast, sometimes known as a phase contrast microscope. I had an office downtown Dallas, and I would look at all of the Americans' blood, and there were once in a while I'd see a parasite, but not much. And I took a fellow who was sweeping the floor out in the hall. He was from Mexico, and I took his blood and put it under the microscope. It was crawling with parasites. I mean, there was ones going through like this, and other ones wiggling around. It was crawling with parasites. So there are parasites, but in America, we characteristically don't have as many because we have a pretty good public health system. But, you know, like in Mexico, I mean, it's just horrendous how you know, the problems they have. But a lot of things that they don't have. You know, we now have, if you walk down the aisle in Kroger, 70% of all the food on to the left and to the right of you is ultra processed, which means the nanoparticles particles are so small that they can get inside of your cells and gum up your cells. When I walk down the street and look at people, I have never seen such a sick crew of people. Never. In Oriental medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, there's 4 different kinds of diagnosis. There's Boshin Jutsu, which is diagnosis by visual observation. You tend to have a ruddy complexion. What does that mean? It means you have a slight inflammation, a subclinical inflammation of your vascular tree, right? He tends to have a slight gray-green complexion with circles under his eyes. He's got slight congestion of the liver and improper function of the kidneys. I'll show you something. Put your foot up here.
My foot?
Yeah, that's it. Now I'm going to squeeze the inside of your leg. How's that feel?
A little bit.
Down here. It's because your kidneys are not taking all the fluid out of your system, and water being heavy tends to accumulate down by your ankles, right? So do the diagnosis by looking at your face, and I can reinforce it by physical examination. When I work with people, I really love to have both laboratory analysis, right? Sometimes I used to take a blood chemistry known as an SMA-24. There were different components of your blood, like do you have enough or sodium, do you have blood urea nitrogen, and I would read these, and then I would go and shake hands with the patient, and I would know what was going on because I had the lab report. But people who had problems with their kidneys, their hands would be a little moist. People who had problems with their liver, their hands would be a little greasy. After a while, I didn't need the SMA-24. I could just shake hands with them, look at their face, and pretty much diagnose them, you know, right on the money. That Oriental diagnosis is so accurate, I've almost never seen it fail. Every time I thought those old Chinese docs were wrong, I was mistaken. They were right on the money. So the point is, what were we talking about? All of this stuff is like, it's there, and we have a full, thorough, complete, and exhaustive technology of health as opposed to a technology of disease, right?
Right.
I mean, it's there. Chinese medicine has a lot of it, But it's, you know, Western medicine's got a lot of good stuff, laboratories, you know, x-rays. They brought me a little girl who she hurt her foot, and it hurt after she had been playing soccer. They took her to the finest orthopedic doctors who were brilliant, and they're head of their class and all. They couldn't figure out what's wrong with her. So I took a tuning fork, I whacked the tuning fork on the table, and I put the stem of the tuning fork on her foot, and I moved it around until she hollered, and I said, "Does that hurt?" She said, "Yeah." I said, I drew a circle around it with a magic marker. I said, "Take her back to your orthopedic surgeon and tell him that she has a hairline fracture of the fourth metatarsal right here," right? I mean, isn't that elegant? I mean, isn't that just the coolest thing you could ever think of? But I love reading x-rays. I love reading x-rays. Oh, they tell you so much. But it's all of this material, well, of course, you know, I've been doing it for 50 years, right? So all of this stuff is so obvious to me, so easy. But of all the technologies, the stem cell biology in terms of health absolutely reigns supreme. Thank you for your time and attention. If you have any other questions, I will get out of your hair now.
Of course, you know, once he gets up and running with stem cells, we're going to be in there, you know. But we've been telling him he needs them too, eh? So he does. I think he does for sure. And so it's amazing. Personally, you know, I've gotten stem cells a few times, but I'm not that unhealthy, you know. And so I haven't really noticed anything spectacular. The people that are really unhealthy are the ones that really have the amazing, you know, results, things like that.
Or like Darren, you know, with his foot.
Yeah, right. Darren was in a motorcycle accident when he was like, you know, 20 or something like that. And he had to go undergo like dozens of surgeries and stuff like that. They took something out of his back, some muscle out of his back, and put it in his foot so that he could walk. Anyways, so his foot, you know, is bleeding. You know, it's been, and Joe gave him some stem cells, and at least it quit bleeding, and that kind of stuff. You know.
And he used to ooze blood.
Yeah.
He, you know, he had a real hard time walking on it, but he lost. I mean, he really. It hurt his foot. It's like he lost half his foot, and the stem cells immediately made an improvement.
Yeah, they had to do reconstructive surgery is what they had to do. But and of course, you know, I mean, I'm sure the doctors did the best they could, but you know, it's pretty tough, you know, when you're doing reconstructive surgery, that's for sure.